Hi guys, so after seeing the VAXEE's honest and comprehensive release videos about the VAXEE XE wireless, I knew I had to get one. I've been using mine for about 3 weeks now and my experiences with it has been really pleasant. So let's get right into the build quality. The build quality on the VAXEE XE is really solid and there is no creaking or sideways flex anywhere. I can get my side button to actuate if I press really hard from the side, but seriously, why would you do that while gaming?
Why?
The switches that VAXEE uses on the buttons are Huanos. Usually the Huanos are a bit stiffer switch, but on this one they are actually very light and crisp. There is no pre-travel and a tiny amount of post-travel on my buttons. The amount of post-travel and the stiffness of the switches depends on where you press the button. I press it right next to the scroll wheel and honestly I like them really much. They feel crisp and really high quality mechanical switches. You can also set the debounce time from 8 down to 2 milliseconds from the bottom of the mouse. Lastly, the sideways wobble is minimal on the main buttons and there is no grinding on the buttons when you bottom out. The scroll wheel has a mechanical encoder and it feels quite light to scroll with noticeable notches. The scroll wheel button is however too stiff in my opinion. It is usually my ping button, so my ability to aggressively spam the ping to my randoms after I've been downed after stupidly pushing a team solo is now nerfed. Sad. There is also this additional button, which on the standard firmware acts like a battery display and a page down key, which you can then bind in-game to whatever you like it to do. On the competitive firmware, it just shows the battery level. The side buttons are also Huano switches and they feel very nice. They are very light to actuate and have no annoying pre or post travel on my copy. The design of the side buttons is not my favorite, however, since it is sometimes hard to distinguish which button you are pressing because there is very small gap between the buttons. I quite like the fact that the side buttons are glossy instead of matte, because usually my matte coated side buttons get unevenly shiny after some time. Here is a quick sound test of all the buttons. On the mouse, it is possible to have two kinds of firmware. Let's talk about the standard first. On the standard firmware, you can turn on high-speed mode and motion sync separately. Turning these on is very easy, but requires some memorizing or a manual next to you. That is because this mouse doesn't need any bloatware on your computer and is configurable straight on the mouse instead. Basically, you hold different button combinations and turn the mouse on again and voila, you are now high speed. In all honesty, I couldn't distinguish the high speed and motion sync modes from one another, and they basically aim to do the same thing with different methods, and you can also turn these both on at the same time, but from those I'd recommend just using the high speed mode if you want to keep some basic functionalities if you don't want to go to the competitive mode, which I'm gonna talk about soon. Here are the motion delay results with the standard firmware, and we get constantly 0.5 milliseconds delay compared to the control unit. It's around the same as on the GPX, so it's super good. So then about the competitive firmware. VAXEE also released shortly after the initial release their competitive firmware to the mouse, which basically cuts all unnecessary non-gaming related functions from the mouse and also ups the battery life a bit from the high-speed mode. With the competitive firmware, the battery life is around 50 hours according to VAXEE, and in my experience it holds true. With the competitive firmware, you lose the page down function, ability to do motion sync and the option to turn modes quickly since it only has one mode after you switch to the competitive firmware, and you cannot change the lift of distance anymore and it's locked to the low setting, which in my opinion is the best one. But in my opinion, these following motion delay results justify the usage really well. The motion delay is almost as good as on the Razer 4K, which is insane. This is a 1000 Hz mouse. I got consistently lower delay than on my control unit and I was really unsure if I just measured it wrong, so I slid into the DMs of House from House Gaming on Twitter and he confirmed that these results are in fact correct. Thanks house. Compared to the high speed and motion sync modes where the motion delay was already really low, the competitive firmware perfects the sensor performance, so I highly recommend using it with this mouse. VAXEE has a great tutorial video on YouTube about how to set it up. It is just really basic firmware updating on the device and the dongle. The 1000 polling rate was also really stable, and there are no kinks in the graphs at 1600 dpi, which would indicate sensor smoothing, so there is none at 1600 dpi on this mouse. Then let's talk about the weight. Unlike almost every other company, VAXEE did not want to risk the integrity of the mouse by doing too much weight cutting with their first wireless release. And the mouse weighs 76 grams. And I have to admit that I was really skeptical of the weight, since other companies have been able to release good performing sub 60 gram mice for some time now. But after using this for 3 weeks non-stop, I have to admit that the weight does not play a big part in how good the mouse feels and how good it performs. I noticed my hand getting a little tired during the first week of usage, but now it feels like using every other mouse. I only noticed the weight difference mainly when swapping from lighter mice to this one, but I adjust to this one rather quickly. And this is mind-blowing for a guy who's been swapping batteries and 3D printing parts for mice to get some weight reduction. Damn you VAXEE for making me regret my mouse modding decisions. The coating on the mouse is really nice. It feels like middle ground between two awesome coatings found on the XM2WE and the G Pro Superlight. The surface is more like a paint-like feeling and has a light shimmer to it. It's no fingerprint magnet either, so I'm seriously impressed by it. Together with the shape, the mouse feels really good for relaxed claw. The shape shares similarities with the GPX, but the hand feeling is a lot different. It is, in my opinion, best described by the VAXEE's image from their website. It is silly, but I can feel this triangle of contact points on my palm while using it. It is a quite wide mouse, not only from the back but also from the front and the middle, so people with very narrow hands might not like it. But my hand is more like a pocket-sized shovel, short and wide, so I quite like it. I have no problems reaching the scroll wheel either, so the button placement is nicely done as well. And speaking about the buttons, there is also a really nice ring finger ledge on the mouse, and there are these small grooves on the buttons which offer great comfort for your index and middle finger. My least favorite thing about this mouse was the mouse gauge, which had visible raised edges on them, which in turn felt somewhat scratchy on coarser mousepad surfaces. But luckily, using this mouse on the Pulsar Superglide glass pad, which I'm currently testing, fixed the issue, because the Superglide pad is harder and glass pads in general wear down the skates faster. The raised edges were sanded down in a few days. After that, they feel like solid PTFE feet and the scratchiness is gone. But they are, however, very soft PTFE, so if there is some dirt left on the pad while using this mouse, it can cause some scratches to the skates. Then let's talk about the price and the availability. So, me and my wallet don't like the price trend of gaming mice these days, let's be honest. So, I can say the price of this mouse is great, but in my opinion it is more reasonable than the new Zowie mouse, for example. With the price you get the really good build quality and top-notch performance that almost rivals the Razer 4K Hz in motion delay. So I can easily see this mouse to be endgame worthy, and if you want to try this you should not worry about weight too much. The mouse is only available through VAXEE's website, but they dispatch their products fairly quickly, at least to Finland. Availability is quite iffy these days since it is just the first batches we're talking about, but more batches should come soon. So that is it for this video. Subscribe if you want to see more of my content and press like if you found this video helpful. I'll be back in the next video. Goodbye.